The worst part about talking about the negatives of empowerment is the backlash of the impatient and unintelligent. But I think it's important for people who do find issue with this video's title and message to realize this. The mere fact that you are offended and made upset by this video's title and message is clear proof of my point. Were you offended because you believe in women's empowerment? In gay pride? In trans pride? Would you be offended if the video was critiquing men's empowerment? Straight pride? Cis pride? Probably not. But why did you assume that I was going after your movement and not the other one? Why does that term, pride and empowerment, in our collective mindset only relate to women, homosexuals? Aren't there movements on earth that discuss pride and empowerment for other groups? Here's my point. One of my thesis statements, I suppose. The reason you assumed I was talking about you is because you alone control the narrative of empowerment and pride when it comes to the status quo. The mainstream. You have a monopoly on pride and empowerment. If you didn't, then whatever other group would hold that position would be offended and would have assumed I was talking about them. If I told you we should end crashes, you would assume I'm talking about car accidents, not software crashes, or skateboarders hitting the wall, doing a kickflip nollie dart grind on a half pipe and then face planting. All of these are types of crashes that are commonly understood, but one holds the collective consciousness when it comes to the negative perception of crashes. Don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing women's empowerment because it's women's empowerment. I'm not criticizing gay pride because it's gay pride. I'm criticizing the notion, the very base idea of empowerment and pride, the negative effects it has on society, and the clear bigotry that it promotes. What is the problem with empowerment? Let's go really basic and expected here. What is the problem with empowering women? According to the mainstream, women have not been in power ever. Women have been silenced and given no voice of their own to claim what is rightfully theirs. For centuries, women were treated as objects, used and then discarded at the whim of their abusers, men. Women couldn't affect change in their society and had no way to make their own choices. Abused and harassed, women's well-being was completely put on the sidelines in order to bolster the men around them. Now, ignoring the baggage that society places on all of us when it comes to this topic, and if I were looking at this topic as an alien who just arrived on Earth, I would say that none of the previous statements should be used as a reason to empower any group. Regardless of the viciousness of what happened in the past, whether it's accurate or completely overblown and exaggerated, there is no reason to take a group of victimized people who share some common intrinsic trait and empower them. Before proceeding though, let's talk about the accuracy of these claims. Were women abused and used in the past? How has the persecution of women been accurately portrayed? The issue I have with this perspective is that it is a stereotyping of tens of thousands of years of humanity into some sort of collective history that we all supposedly share. Why do we value variety in our representation of people and not in our education? How has this world decided to categorically assume the truth instead of learning about it? This is blatant irresponsibility and quite simply a shameful act of lying by omission. Have there been oppressed women in the past? Yes. And the reason I can say yes confidently is because there have been oppressed men in the past as well. There have been oppressed people in the past. And I can say that because I know that there are oppressed people today. We live in a world that is constantly droning on and on about human rights.
Whether we're talking about gender inequality or racism or queer rights.
I got every word in that sentence.
We do want Nazis to be afraid to organize in public.
But the people spewing these never-ending hyperbolic and expected platitudes of nonsense and drivel don't have the balls to call out the people who are actually oppressing others. It's a lot easier to stand up against the fringe and already excluded groups of people who have zero power in our day-to-day to affect any change. Do you really think a Nazi is oppressing anyone? Who can they oppress? The second they try anything, they'll be beaten in the streets mercilessly and then sent to jail. Historically, women have been treated poorly for sure. They didn't hold the rights that they enjoy today, like voting, owning property, being able to have a job, be part of a religious elite, etc. Well, ignoring this one, also this one, also this one. Also ignore all the queens that held ultimate power and waged war at an alarming rate. My issue with this is that people don't point out specific examples of women accruing less favor by the law and instead pretend that all the world was one country with the same laws. I'll do your work for you. In Rome 735 BC, men were encouraged to beat their wives with a switch no thicker than the base of their thumbs, because a husband was held liable for his wife's actions. You hear that? He would be the one punished by the law if she commits a crime. Sounds fair. In medieval times, the church expected women to win back their husband's favor after he would have beaten them by becoming more servile and loving than ever. This insinuates that a violent husband is in the right by default. It wasn't until the 1900s that France ruled that women shouldn't be beaten by their husbands. Before then, it was stated that women, like walnut trees, should be beaten every day. I mean, that's quite stupid. Might be a joke, still not a good thing. See what I did? I argued your point by citing examples of oppression towards women throughout history, instead of just applying a blanket statement as if it's accurate in every single way.
So as we go forward, you are fucking bald. You're very bald. You're balding. Your hair's thinning, and it's great, which means that you're old as fuck. Is this fun?
The premise is faulty, my friend.
Is this fun for you?
I have a beautiful hairline.
Baldy.
Also realized that only wives were allowed to be beaten.
Family.
Meaning that a man beating a random woman wouldn't be allowed by the church.
Oh god.
Back to the point though. Why is empowerment damaging? Well, empowerment could only work in a hierarchical system. Now, hierarchies are constant in our societies. Even societies that cite their goals to be an egalitarian safe haven are only achieved and maintained using hierarchies. Hierarchies are not damaging on their face. I mean, a government needs to exist so that we are able to keep on savoring the benefits and privileges we like to enjoy, like electricity and water and general safety.
You don't sound Nigerian at all, you dirty dragon-eating little fucking spastic.
But a hierarchy in the social sense is one that is damaging every time. Again, governmental hierarchies do exist, and they need to for our lives to remain as cushy as they have become. But socially, hierarchies at best lead to a mentor-student relationship, like in the case of the elderly.
Oh, there.
And at worst, lead to a social dictatorship class. After looking up the term social dictatorship and realizing that I'm not as smart as I would like to think I am, I found that the ideas that define social dictatorship are pretty close to mine. When a group had been held down and oppressed for extended periods of time, people understandably would start to feel empathy over that oppressed group. When that group holds a certain identifier that is intrinsic to their very being, and when others find the existence of this identifier to somehow be proof of their supposed lower position in society,
What did he say?
it leads to an unfortunate prejudging of people who are no different from their oppressors. Considering the barbarism of some people who have come before us, as the Enlightenment occurred, people started to slowly but surely understand the effect of their long-held beliefs, and started putting them aside. This is where feminism comes in. In my life, I have been the type to criticize feminism, and quite staunchly, but not for the reasons you might think. The best way to describe this is to include another facet of our modern society, but without going too deeply into it, considering that it is a wide topic that requires a very deep dive to get any sort of conclusion. I compare feminism to the Me Too movement, in that one was a horrible idea that was implemented very well, at least in the beginning,
In the beginning.
and that the second is a great idea that was implemented very poorly and led to disastrous effects very early on. Without going too deeply into the Me Too movement, let's just say it has to do with false rape accusations.
Ow!
A problem that discredits real victims, whether they are male or female.
My dog stepped on a bee.
What are you saying?
Back to the issue at hand though, I consider feminism a horrible idea because feminism isn't a human rights group. It's a women's empowerment group. Really, it's a feminism's empowerment group. Because feminism demonizes women making choices that they are at complete freedom to make.
Women like to pretend that they have the choice not to do these things, that it is their choice to do these things, and that's not true.
Bitter women labeling other women who decide to do their own thing as sexist, having internalized misogyny, to dare to have children, as if it's such a leap for some women to want kids, and it must be some mystical self-hatred. Feminism cannot exist without the understanding that men have it bad in many ways as well. Not to go woe is me, I genuinely don't care about men's rights, even though they relate to me. If a feminist wants to recognize obvious issues with men's oppression and the disadvantages they face, they can't call themselves feminists, because feminism needs men to be the oppressors. And how can an oppressor who is infinitely benefiting from the patriarchy on a daily basis have issues?
Feminists do not want you to lose custody of your children. The assumption that women are naturally better caregivers is part of patriarchy. Feminists do not want anyone to be falsely accused of rape. False rape accusations discredit rape victims victims, which reinforces rape culture, which is part of patriarchy.
Empowerment is the key though. I personally find any empowerment group to be a misguided, problematic congregation of, at the beginning at least, either kind-hearted, caring people or angry, oppressed people. As I stated earlier, empowerment will lead to one of these groups becoming social dictators. Now, what is the effect of social dictatorship? Put simply, what is a class of social dictators and what is the side effect on the world around them? Social dictators, as I define them, are the people who run the status quo. See, the status quo in the world shifts from decade to decade. What we see time and time again is a new idea coming up, the old idea initially beating it down to a pulp, the sympathy given to the martyrs, and then the expansions of that ideology if it is reasonable enough, or at least if it gives people who don't speak out the courage to speak out. The issue is that empowerment groups appeal to the lowest common denominator, in a society where the social dictators have become so powerful that they stop relating to the people on the margins. An empowerment group will rise up and take its place if it appeals to those on the margins enough. The margins get wider and wider as social dictators become narrower and narrower. The reason the social dictators become so powerful is because where ideas become mainstream, the money follows. Companies and organizations want to make more money. More money funneled into these ideologies leads to representatives of these groups becoming rich and elite mouthpieces, chosen to represent these ideas and keep them alive and well. And considering that those ideas initially sprung up from a tyrannical system and overcame it, they are seen as the correct system, even though they will inevitably become what they originally fought against. The unfortunate effect of elite groups that are formed from ideologies and the status quo is the alienation of people on the margins. You can't be right, because they are. Either fall in line or you are part of the problem. Social dictatorship at work. And although they can't kill you, they will label you an outsider. You cannot enjoy the same privileges that their chosen people benefit from. Benefits like having a voice, having your problems taken seriously, because your problems don't exist. Being able to voice your concerns and your ideas, inform others that these issues exist and that they are valid. In our society, it has become so extreme that it goes all the way back to the legal standard. Victims of domestic and sexual violence can only be women. Men cannot be. And when they are, it is at best taken as a joke, and at worst, the man is punished by getting arrested for getting assaulted.
She attacked with football moves and tackles and punched. I don't care what she does. If she starts punching you, then you turn around and walk away. If she starts following you, then you walk faster. If she starts chasing you, then you outrun her. If you have to, you get behind the door.
Now, to be clear, none of these talking points are being made to affect social change. As callous as it might sound, I just don't care. What the West wants to do is up to it. Keep driving all your men to suicide. It's not an issue that I can affect or will care enough to do so. The issue I'm facing in this video is that I need to bring up men's rights advocacy points since they are the fringe right now, or at least they have been.
Forget about the disrespect. Facts don't care about your feelings.
Is that the patriarchy?
I like hot chicks. This is not a coming out video. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I don't need a rainbow flag and a teary-eyed video confessing the fact that I like big butts and I cannot lie. But it may be interesting to hear that I'm actually extremely ashamed to be a part of this community.
Female are barely sentient. Even the good ones. In fact, especially the good ones. You're a good female. Shut the fuck up. Listen. Did I say the word listen?
As mentioned before, the inevitable end of social dictators is the rising of fringe groups. You see it more and more every year, people who stand up against the social dictators for better or for worse. Since the social dictators are feminists, the fringe groups fought against them in their own ways. And the one that was able to win back the hearts was the one that appealed to the lowest common denominator. See this, feminists, gay pride advocates, trans pride advocates? You created this. This is your fault. And you have no one but yourself to blame. The people you so handily criticized have been pushed so far to the margins that they spilled over and are now challenging your throne of dictators. The only reason they haven't yet is because the funding and infrastructure that you've built keeps you afloat. But mark my words, you will not make it out of this social battle alive. There is no way for you to win against the hordes of socially marginalized groups that you have created. It is only a matter of time before the pendulum swings and smashes you in the face like you deserve. Thousands of years of human history completely ignored and pushed to the side because you wanted to enjoy the view you had for a few decades. The fall is going to be unrelenting, and you have only yourself to blame. You wanna know what the saddest thing of all is? These men's, straights, and anti-promiscuity movements are just as bad. They are their own empowerment group. We are going nowhere, and we are destined to repeat the same mistakes we've made before. I'll be here in 30 years making the same point I made today, and I'll be citing examples from a different movement. One that promotes the empowerment of men, one that calls women gold-digging whores with no empathy, one where a woman who has the gall to ask for what she wants or needs is a bitch, because everything is afforded to her free of charge. One where if a woman were to bring up suicide issues for women, she will be silenced for daring to question how much worse it is for men, without even bringing up men. Lie in your filth while you can, you haven't got long left. Okay, if I'm being completely honest, it might not be that extreme. But it is definitely going to be the case that the next social dictators will silence the modern talking points of women that have persisted for decades, and thus all new margins will be created. Rinse and repeat. The modern day examples are the most extreme. Back in the day, margins needed to find each other to affect change. Nowadays, we have margin groups on the internet. Mouthpieces have never been easier to establish. People who want to be heard can be heard loud and clear. Ours is a time that needs care and sensibility. We cannot go around telling others to keep quiet when we are talking. They can talk. They don't need your permission anymore, and they will. And when someone talks, someone will be there to listen. Someone who shares their passion, their strife, and their oppression at the hand of the social dictators. Did someone say a better way? Yes. For a limited time only, you can, for the small payment of a like and a subscribe. Keep watching this video. Let's do it, gamers. Apparently this is supposed to decrease likes and subs. Let's see. Prove me wrong. I find empowerment disgusting. Pride and never-ending hole that cannot be filled. Hierarchies are necessary to keep these systems alive and running, and social hierarchies based solely on a person's what instead of their who can only lead to disdain and alienation. The smartasses among you might say that empowerment of a weaker set of people will only potentially lead to making this group equal. But that's not the goal of empowerment groups. Empowerment groups will empower a group all the way up until they become social dictators. They won't stop when they have achieved equality. Equality cannot be achieved through a group that advocates for a single demographic. You want to be an activist and help the less fortunate or the oppressed? Then recognize that all the issues that matter to the world are not women's issues. They're not men's issues. They're not gay or straight or trans issues. They're not black issues, white issues, Asian issues, or Indian issues. They are people's issues. And people all have one thing in common. We're all the same fucking thing. I don't care what's between your legs, what you stick between your legs, or what pills you're on. None of your issues are your own. You have no ownership over people's ills. You want to end assault of trans people on the street? That apparently happens all the time from what I hear. How about you just end assault? Now it's no longer a trans issue, is it? You want to end the objectification of women? How about you just end objectification altogether? Wow, it's no longer a woman's issue. You want to end mental health issues for men that lead them to suicide? How about you end mental health issues in general and provide support to all people who suffer from depression? Wow, it's no longer a men's issue. You want to end police brutality against black people? How about you end police brutality in general and teach people how to deal with the police, which I mainly would solve by advocating for everyone to complete police training and having it be some sort of benefit to people's CV in our greater society.
We want his badge, we want his gun, we want his job. What's going on today, gentlemen? Huh? What's wrong with you? What's going on today, gentlemen? What do you want? What's happening here? What's wrong with you? Back up. Huh? Well, I've shot because he was within that zone. You know, I felt there was an imminent threat. I didn't understand how important compliance was, but after going through this, yeah, my attitude has changed. This is all unfolding in 10 to 15 seconds. People need to comply with the orders of law enforcement officers for their own sake.
Makes police brutality no longer a race issue. The problem with groups is the alienation and separation of the general population of these supposedly women's or men's or gays or trans or blacks or whites issues. Separating a person from your advocacy will only serve to estrange people who don't fit your criteria but are still suffering from the same issues you advocate for. And the more you advocate, the more you try to empower, the more people who are suffering alongside you will find themselves opposing you. And when David faces Goliath, David will get sympathy, not Goliath, regardless of how gay, trans, or black or a woman Goliath is. With that in mind, no more groups, please. No more movements. We aren't in the Stone Age anymore. Advocate for the suffering, not the people that you assume are suffering based on some preconceived notion of who they are or the numbers you find shocking.